Good evening, everybody.
Benny Goodman and his music.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. Evening, Martin. Hey, Chris and Lorena. Evening, Timothy. Miles, I see you're just having a normal one today. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Lisa.
Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid
Hey, Christina.
and even more torrid band.
Hey, Kyle and Don and Susan.
In the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago.
Hey, Deanne, Lisa, Carolyn, Kristen. He's kind of coming a bunch. Barbara, I did indeed. All right, Bob. Hey, Joanne. Hey, Ava. Hey, Stylo over on YouTube. Hey, Jennifer. This is Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago in 1936. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Amy. Hey, Kathleen. Sherlock. Brittany. I had a good day, but it was busy. I didn't even have time for lunch, mostly because I was trying to get this lamp to work the way I wanted it to. Hey, Laura. But I did. Well, here. Hey, Sabrina. Watch this. Alexa. Plus, I can make it change color. Ah! Yeah, I had to rotate that or something. Hey, John. Hey, Paula. Hey, Dad. Thanks, Tracy. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Megan. Murder they did, yeah. Maybe I should be playing the Murder She Wrote theme here, I guess. Yeah, here it is. I'll try to see if this will show our right side up. There we go. Hey, Don. Hey, Jerry. Hey, Betsy. Yeah, I had to buy a shade for it. Hey, Donna. Hey, Kathleen. Yeah, the lamp is right over here now. If I seem a little more yellow than usual, it's because I've got it on kind of a yellow hue. Hey, Ellen. Hey, Eric. In fact, here, let me see if I can show without disconnecting the microphone. There we go, yeah. That's a little too bright, but I rigged it up with some strip lights on the inside, replacing the two cheesy candles that were in there before. Evening, Chelsea. Hey, Casey. Hey, Lucian. Bala. Yep. Christina the furry duo has been having quite the day. They've been chasing me all over. You can see a bit of Priya over on the couch. Thanks, everybody. Hey, Kevin and Mokina. Karen Ronnie dug the lamp, too. Especially after I showed her what I meant by putting the strip lights in there so the middle lights up. Hey, Jay. Evening, Georgie. Yeah, it turns out they don't really make hue bulbs or smart bulbs that are the right size to go in the little candle things, so I had to improvise. Happy birthday, Ann. And hey, Jacqueline. Christine, I am drinking some Dead Drop Bourbon. Guys, I'll show you all the lamp video again later on. Because, yes, there is an update on the lamp. I did get the lamp. I rigged it up with some smart bulb stuff. Hey, over there in Wanakee. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. It's like one thing Chicagoans never quite master is how to pronounce towns in Wisconsin. Hey, Mandy. Betty, usually. They're in good condition. And not too buried in myth. Well, really, the myth makes the value go up. Hey, Aaron. Evening, Marcia. Hey, David. Hey, Tommy over on Twitch. Tommy, the biggest crowd is on Facebook, by far. Hey, Jenny. Hey, Nancy. But I've got it running on YouTube and Twitch at the same time. Because I know not everybody's on Facebook. I don't blame them if they're not on Facebook. Hey, Fabio. Sheila, okay. Over on Twitch. Hey, Leah. Mike, that does sound perfect. The day you came along. Hey, Laura, I did indeed. Hello, Teresa. Hey, Jordana. Here's Miles. Those of you new here, there's a group on Facebook called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club. Miles has been driving me nuts today, wanting to play with his toy. Hey, Steph over on YouTube. Hey, Betsy. Hey, Emily. Hey, Heidi. Hey, Renee on YouTube. Hey, Marizo. Hey, Marita. Evening to everybody. Hey, Rose. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put the away message up. Because I know we got some new people coming. I already had how do I watch the video emails earlier. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Tracy. Hey, Kristen. Miles, what are you on about? You can't get in that drawer. Stay away from Daddy's stash. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Heidi. Yeah, here for those of you just joining us, here's the lamp, all rigged up. Watch this. Hey, Laura. Hey, Rebecca. I don't know where all the people on YouTube are coming from tonight. But hey, welcome, everybody. Hey, Bridget. Miles. I saw that lamp this morning when I was doing prowling around to start the mini tour. Saw it in the window, had to have it. Hey, Stylo. Over on YouTube. A lot of YouTubers tonight, relatively speaking. Usually we have like a few hundred on Facebook and a few on Twitch and YouTube. The clerk at the lamp store had intended to buy this lamp herself, so it was kind of hard to bargain. Hey, Grandma Belle. Hey, Cassidy. My sister's on here, everybody. Hey, Kurt. The reader, I don't know if I haven't seen the reader thing yet. Hey, Christy. Hey, Angela. Alright, Cassidy's girlfriend's here, too. Hey, Sherry. Hey, Susan down there in Huntsville. Alright, we'll give Benny another song here. and then we'll get started. People tend to log on, especially for these new ones, they tend to log on right at 8 o'clock. A Gem of the Prairie is an interesting book. I wouldn't call it a reliable book, but it's an interesting book. Herbert Asbury invented quite a bit of Chicago mythology, and his Gangs of New York book did the same for New York. Hey, Brian. Oh, hey, Kristen. Hey, Kathy in Arkansas. Hey, Rita in Kalamazoo, zoo. Enjoy the audiobook. Hey, Amber. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Eleanor, yeah, I saw the Ida B. Wells Barbie. That's awesome. Thanks, Kat. Hey, Terrell and Peter. Evening, Carrie. Evening, Jana in Colorado. Hey, Dirk. A lot of Kalamazoo in the house tonight. Hey, Edwina. Right, Christy is Cassidy's girlfriend if you're keeping score at home. Did somebody buy that lamp? Yeah, me. Hey, Glenn over on YouTube. A Pullman lamp would be very fancy and very expensive. Hey, Kat in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We'll let Benny Goodman finish out this song, then get started properly. All right.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented
Presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago back in 1936. That was Benny Goodman and his orchestra. And with that, I think it is time that we get started properly. But for those just joining us, yes, who are on the mini tour today, yep, I got the lamp. And check this out. All right, so welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from the Mysterious Chicago Tour Company. I have been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books. I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time. So I am incredibly famous, and you should definitely pay attention to whatever I'm saying. Among my related books are Mysterious Chicago, the book, the brand new Murder Maps USA that came out from Thames and Hudson just recently. In fact, I've got a copy of it right here. We just might be doing a giveaway tonight since we got so many new people. H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. And coming this summer from University of Illinois Press, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. So I've been a tour guide and historian here. For those of you new, I think there's a lot of new people tonight. So I've been doing this for about 20 years, but a couple of years ago when everything shut down, I started just doing virtual tours. I started going out every day at 10 o'clock and doing a little mini virtual tour on the Mysterious Chicago Facebook page. And we've kept that up. I've barely missed a day. I think I've missed 1 or 2 days in the last 2 years. And plus, every Thursday night and every Sunday morning, we do a full-length virtual tour like this one. They're all the same setup. Throw some money in if you want to, but you absolutely don't have to. And since we got some new people today, well, the especially thing I like to plug is the Patreon. On the Patreon, you get pictures of coyotes and cemeteries every week. You get Chicago history stories every week. You get gems from my H.H. Holmes collection, which is pretty extensive. You get deep research stuff, starting for as low as $3 a week. So today we are going to do a giveaway of this handsome volume, Murder Maps USA. It's my latest book from Thames and Hudson Press. Really handsome volume, like blood red pages, gruesomely illustrated, with stories of murders between 1860 and 1940 across the USA. All you got to do to enter this is either sign up for the Patreon, which you can do for as low as $3 a month, or be on the Patreon already and send me a message on the Patreon. That's all you got to do. Put the word waffle in the message. They don't like me to say raffle on these things. Some of you long-term viewers might remember that PayPal cut me off because they decided I was a gambling kingpin for the use of the word raffle. But all right, and yes, Audrey, if for the winner, I will absolutely sign a copy of it. I think the only one of these I've signed is for the last raffle winner. But all right, everybody. So today what we are going to talk about is antique serial killers. We tend to advertise H.H. Holmes as America's first serial killer. That's just marketing. He was not even the first one in Chicago, but of course we also have to get into the question of what counts as a serial killer. Now, the term as we know it today, as it started going around in the 70s and became known by the general public in the 1990s, is serial killers are people who kill for no reason other than an inner need to do so. Usually they have the same MO, the same way of doing it, the same type of victim, and no particular motive. Usually it has to be more than two people over a period with a cool-down time in the middle, but there's a lot of varying definitions for these things. Almost none of these people necessarily fit the exact definition. H.H. Holmes always had a motive. There was always some moving behind it. I don't get the impression at all that he really just did it because he felt like it. We'll get into all of that later on, but from the broader term, these are just people who murdered more than one person over a period of time. And that's about the easiest definition to go with. Others may nitpick with it. But in a lot of cases, we just don't have a whole lot of information or enough to go by. So to start with, we will go all the way back to 1840. And here we are. That's the wrong button. Okay, well, here we are over in the woods near Jefferson Park. 1840, all of Jefferson Park looked like this, only a whole lot more trees. It's kind of been moved into a park now. It's somewhere around this general vicinity. It's impossible to know where. But there was a woman named Lucretia Thompson, who one day has some passers-by that if they could find her cows, if they could please send the cows back to her. That was Chicago in the 1840s. Your cows might wander away and you just have to hope somebody found them and sent them back to you. Leave them alone and they'll come home. So a few people walked away. This was a logging camp over nearby. Then later on, they heard Lucretia Thompson screaming. Initially, they thought, oh, she's just trying to find her cows. But then they followed her out a while, followed the sound a while later, saw all of the hogs gathered around something. And it turned out they were all gathered around the dead body of Lucretia Thompson. She had been brutally murdered and assaulted. Body just left kind of lying over here. And this really was about Chicago's first proper murder. This is about as good as newspaper articles about it get. They found nearby a man by the name of John Stone who was setting fire to his pants. And after asking around a while, they determined that he was, in fact, probably the guilty party. A guy named Henry Rhines, one of 3 police officers that we had at the time, came to arrest him. And here's me doing the hand jive on Henry Rhines' grave. That was the last dance move I had left by the time I got to him. Not so much because he arrested John Stone. That was perfectly reasonable. He also spent most of his time arresting people that he thought might be refugee slaves who had run away from down south. This is from the Chicago Daily American. This was not a great newspaper. It was one of the few newspapers that we had in 1840. And there's no drawing of John Stone or anything like that. About the only drawings you were going to see in this was stuff like this log cabin drawing. This was what papers were like at the time. In Chicago, there was hardly any local news most of the time. The newspapers were usually... The local news would be, okay, there's 3,000 people here and 2,000 of us have cholera, but you all already know that. And then the rest would just be about how much they hated Martin Van Buren. They spent most of their time as of May 1840 advocating for the presidency of William Henry Harrison, but they did end up covering the trial of John Stone fairly well. We'd only had one murder trial in Chicago that anyone knows about, and the guy ended up being acquitted in that case. While he was on the stand, they asked John Stone, all right, Stone, how come you were burning your pants? And he said, because they were dirty, that's all. And they said, all right, Stone, so how come you didn't burn your shirt, too? And he said, well, there was no blood on that. Oops. So he was found guilty based almost entirely on that. When some people came to interview him in jail to ask about his religious beliefs, something they were very into at the time, they asked him, will you at least confess to this now? And he insisted that no, he had not murdered Lucretia Thompson, but he did say, however, I have murdered other people before. So this is probably fair. Now, you'd mix all of this up, a guy brutally murdering a woman seemingly for no particular reason, and then claiming that he had done the same thing several times before, it sounds to me like we've got a serial killer on our hands. However, there's just not enough information to go by, and nobody really asked him for too many more details on these things, and a couple of months later, he was taken down to the dunes about where 26th Street is now, and hanged in a makeshift gallows. Now, nearby lived at what is now Roosevelt and Loomis, up over here, lived a guy by the name of George W. Green. The next day, George W. Green stole the gallows they had used to hang John Stone, or at least according to legend, and then used them to make furniture. 15 years later, George W. Green murdered his wife. Murdered his wife using strychnine poisoning, was caught through some very early examples of forensics. I tell the story in a little more detail sometimes on the Rose Hill Cemetery tour, so I don't go into it too much here. But according to this book, of which this drawing is the frontispiece, he had also killed many other people over the course of the years, including half of his neighbors' children, most of his neighbors' pets. It's very difficult to take the book entirely seriously. They make him like a Dickensian cackling villain. But it is pretty wildly entertaining. Now, while he was in prison, awaiting his sentencing, he hanged himself in prison. This is a drawing of a photograph that was taken of the body that was then sold the very next day. Now, even with this picture going around 30 years later, the main thing everybody remembered about George W. Green is there were a lot of conspiracy theories saying that he hadn't actually hanged himself in prison. He had actually escaped and gone overseas someplace. This one came up over and over again. I don't think any of the copies of the photographs still survive. If they did, it might have been a little bit easier to debunk the old story. But they were selling it in the Daguerrean Saloon, right by Henry Rhine's house at Randolph and LaSalle back at the time. The only one I've ever found is this drawing of it. But so those are a couple of possible serial killers of which we just don't have enough information one way or the other. Decades before H.H. Holmes, there are a couple others that we can confirm a little bit better. One of whom was a doctor operating down here on Madison Street. Madison, just about Madison and Racine. I happened to film his old hangout here on a nice drizzly day. I love it when I manage to film things when the weather is just perfect like this. So right here, where the children's haircut place is now, was formerly the office of a doctor by the name of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream. Scottish-born, emigrated to Canada and then the United States, was first arrested in 1879 for performing an illegal abortion on a woman who died on the table. And newspapers liked the guy just because of his name. The Chicago Times wrote that Cream is a tartar. Get it? Like cream of tartar? Ho, ho, ho. And he was acquitted in that case. But a few months later, he became romantically involved by a woman named Stott. Her husband, Daniel Stott, lived out in Garden Prairie, about 50 miles west, and he apparently told her, well, what we're going to have to do is get him out of the way. Here's some poison, slip it into his food. Now, this ends up being one of my favorite gravestones in the whole entire world. Out in Garden Prairie. Now, once the authorities came sniffing around, the girlfriend gave Dr. Cream up immediately, leading to this gravestone here. Used to be able to see a Freemason logo at the top. It says, here lies Daniel Stott, poisoned by his wife and Dr. Cream. It is highly unusual to see a murder mystery carved onto a gravestone like that. But in this case, he was arrested for murdering Daniel Stott, did some time in Joliet prison, then ended up getting out and going back to the UK, where he started working as a doctor again. Here's how he looked then, notably less dapper than he had back in Chicago, where he looks exactly like you would hope an antique serial killer would look. But he was arrested after having murdered several young women. What he was doing was he was performing illegal abortions on them and then giving them painkillers loaded with way, way, way too much strychnine. So he was eventually hanged in the UK for that. According to the executioner, Billington, his last words right before they dropped the trap door was, "I was Jack the." Now, this is a story that Billington liked to tell around the bar. It was just plain good publicity for him. It was probably not true. In fact, during the time of the Jack the Ripper murders, he was in prison in Joliet. So unless you want to get into one of those theories like he was secretly replaced by a double, which has been fairly thoroughly disproven by now, A.J. Griffiths Jones got a hold of his prison records and wrote this excellent book. It's a novel. It was a novel, but it was at the time the best book written on Thomas Neill Cream, Prisoner 4374 by A.J. Griffiths Jones. But there has just been a brand new one about Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, and that was The Case of the Murderous Dr. Cream by Dean Jobb. Just came out very recently. And I'm actually mentioned in this one. He gives me some props for being the first person to connect Dr. Cream to the murder of a woman named Alice Montgomery, who was in between his first arrest and his second. I was looking up something completely different in the newspapers one day, and I came across these articles about the mysterious death of Alice Montgomery. And it came out that Alice Montgomery had died in a boarding house. An autopsy revealed that she had undergone an abortion and then taken some painkillers that were loaded with entirely too much strychnine. Furthermore, it turned out the boarding house was just about a block away from Dr. Thomas Neill Cream's office, so the reason I figured this out was that nobody else had seen the articles about Alice Montgomery. It was almost entirely too obvious at the time. So that is one guy generally accepted as a serial killer who operated in Chicago about 10 years before H.H. Holmes got started. There was another guy around the same time whose career lasted a bit longer. We're up on North Avenue here, just to the little west of Old Town. If I was charging people for an apartment, I'd still call it Old Town. Now, initially, I only knew the corner where this was, so I was really hoping it would turn out to be right where the European Wax Center is now. But it was no such luck. It was actually, the building we're looking for in question was actually the one across the street to the left where the Stop and Save is now. But right here, where across from the European Wax Center, there was a guy by the name of Henry Meyer operating a doctor's office. And you notice that this is a theme that comes up quite a bit. It's a lot of doctors in this thing. And also, there's also kind of a running theme showing up where later on it would say that they had been testing their poisons on hobos. And of course, these are doctors in that sense. H.H. Holmes, for one, managed to graduate medical school just because the professors took pity on him. It was about a 2-year program. But there was one guy, I had just found this new drawing of him in the National Police Gazette, named Henry Meyer. And over here they refer to him as a rich Chicago Jew doctor accused of poisoning his wife. This is the only reference I have ever seen calling him Jewish. If he had been Jewish, every other newspaper probably would have said so. But Henry Meyer is a better picture of him, was operating as a doctor over here. He fell in love with a woman named Ida Gelderman, who was married to another person named Henry. Now, he was married to an Ida as well, so there was Henry and Ida, then he fell in love with the other Ida who was married to the other Henry. This gets a little bit complicated after a while. But he decided the thing to do was to kill his wife and to kill Mr. Henry Gelderman. So that's what he did. He poisoned the two of them. And fairly quickly, people figured out what had happened here. They ended up disinterring the bodies. They said that there was still a crown of flowers around Ida's head. And Ida happens to be, Henry is buried in an unmarked space in St. Boniface Cemetery, which was called the German Lutheran Cemetery at the time, but he's buried right about here. Whereas Ida the First, Henry's first wife, is in an unmarked family plot over here in Graceland Cemetery, over by the Western Wall. And I was very pleased to find this one. It looks exactly like you would hope the unmarked grave of a serial killer's family would look. Right in between these spaces here. So we can look at there's a lot record we can check out here. Put Henry right in the middle. Ida was his first wife. Edwin was a son who died just a couple of years later. There was also some suspicion when the son died. And then with Ida, too, he had a few other children. And most of these, they seem to have died of scarlet fever. That kind of thing happened all the time. There's nobody was particularly suspicious about these ones, except there's one of them that if you look, the baby was buried the same day that it died. Yeah, the Victoria died 723, burial 723. That's a little bit unusual. But eventually he got tired of Ida too, and she got very sick. Almost certainly he had tried to poison her. Though she survived, he ended up having to just get a normal divorce from her. She ended up living across the street from where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre later took place. But Henry, undeterred, married a woman by the name of Mary Dresser. And with Mary, they got into this whole con routine where she would meet other men, rich men, and marry them, and then the two of them would kill that man so that she would get the life insurance money. We have no idea how many times they might have done this before they finally got caught in New York. And the trial in New York was quite a thing. They were midway through the trial when one of the jurors went nuts. Now, they show him right here, he just kind of collapsed and started claiming that he was Jesus Christ or something like that. It was not quite as cliche as saying that he was Napoleon, but they had to restart the entire trial right in the middle of it. Meyer showed up in a beard here. And he was eventually sentenced to life in prison in Sing Sing. I think Mary was actually let off the hook. They suffered a stillborn baby in the middle of the trial. Harry went to Sing Sing for a while, but somehow or another he got out. There's a newspaper article saying he had petitioned for a pardon, and I don't know what became of it, but eventually he must have gotten out because he went right back to Chicago and started pulling the same act, looking for a young woman who would get involved in his scheme to marry rich people, kill them, and take their money. He was eventually arrested for this again, and there was a terrific article that he had written to somebody, one of them saying, "We evildoers love the night and darkness and hate the daylight." Trying to convince them to go through with the things that they had planned on doing. He was eventually caught again, sent to Joliet prison, where he probably died. I haven't been able to determine for sure. It's fairly difficult because, frankly, he wasn't. Not only was he not the only Henry C. Meyer in Chicago, he also wasn't the only Henry C. Meyer who was born in Hamburg in 1834, who was operating in Chicago in the 1780s and 1770s. The trial was in New York in 1893. So that puts him a little bit ahead. One other person that we got to cover before we get to H.H. Holmes is we're going to start right down over here at the approximate site of the Grand Pacific Hotel, right where the Wintrust Bank is now. I think it was actually, there's a plaque on there that says the Grand Pacific was right here. It was really a little bit further over to the left from here, but hey, close enough. But it was briefly the home of a woman by the name of Minnie Wallace. Now, this is Minnie at the age of 15. When she was 15, she lived in New Orleans, but was lured to Emporia, Kansas, to marry the mayor, who was 48. Very shortly after the wedding, the mayor died of arsenic poisoning. Naturally, everybody assumed that Minnie had killed him. She almost certainly had. But you know what? When a guy's 48 and convinces a 15-year-old girl to marry him, and then she kills him and takes all his money, I'm kind of okay with it. The trial was quite a thing. They found out that the surprise, this 48-year-old mayor was a real sleazebag. He was very into going to brothels, and also, more critically, was really into eating arsenic. He didn't really eat enough to kill him, but he took like arsenic tablets because he believed that it gave him sexual powers and protected him from sexually transmitted diseases. The Emporia newspaper article about that day in the trial is really fun. Smut! Give me smut and nothing but dirty linen, giving one's own character away to smirch the dead. Fearful revelations, the ghost of the dead man on the rack attempts to make his memory more odorous than his viscera. But according to the doctor, he was eating arsenic, so it could have just been an accident. Minnie was let off of the hook, got all of his money, and a few years later moved to Chicago. She ended up living down on South Indiana Street. Not too much is known about the house, but I did find an article saying that there was this portrait of her, a painting of her hanging over the mantel. Maybe that painting is still out there someplace. It would be fascinating to find. Because after a couple of years in Chicago, about 13 years after killing that first guy, she married another guy by the name of Jack Ketchum. I just had his picture here. Here it is. Here's Jack Ketchum. He was another old guy, part of a big, wealthy Toledo family. His previous wife, Nettie Poe, had been a second cousin of Edgar Allan Poe, but he died of some sort of poisoning in Chicago, and none of the relatives even realized he had remarried until along came Minnie Wallace saying, "Oh, by the way, I married that guy, he just rewrote his will, and now I get all of his money." The relatives were not pleased by this. There had all kinds of theories saying that she hadn't really married him, that she had killed him, but it never got so far as an indictment against her. So if she did in fact kill him, she got away with it. At least one other lover later was found dead. Though I don't think she could have been the killer in that case either necessarily. But here's the cemetery in Toledo that we visited just a few weeks ago. And part of the reason I went there was really to find Mr. Ketchum's grave. I've also got a request in for his probate file at the legal archives. It's going to take a couple of more weeks, but you never know what might be in a probate file. Probably nothing, but since this one was in dispute, who knows. But there he is in the Ketchum family plot. The Poe family, not Edgar Allan. Edgar Allan's cousins are in the same cemetery. There are a couple of books on her. The best one is one called The Adventuress. I recommend that one over the other one, the more recent one. But it's harder to get. It's not on ebook. But her time in Chicago would have roughly overlapped with the days of H.H. Holmes. We'll start with a very ominous Aldi shot. Then across the street at 63rd and Wallace, just over to the left of where the post office is now, H.H. Holmes built himself a building that came to be known as the Murder Castle. Again, this would have been right about in this space here. About 4 feet of it would have overlapped with the post office. This is one of the lost photos of Holmes. It showed up in newspapers, but no original copy of it has yet turned up. Despite the fact that people have sent me pictures of half the people who ever had a mustache saying it was a lost picture of H.H. Holmes. So, March of 1893, the Chicago Tribune published this article, "Hid in Secret Rooms Where Dealers Discover Their Missing Furniture." We were in the build-up to the World's Fair of 1893. Holmes had added this third floor onto his building. You can see the bricks are a different color there. And having done that, announced that he was going to have a hotel space for the upcoming World's Fair. So what he did really was the place never actually functioned as a hotel. Is one of the great myths of H.H. Holmes that he was preying on fairgoers in 1893. Really, that third floor was not much better than a papier-mâché facade. He was really just using it to swindle people. But all the while, he was working with a guy by the name of Benjamin Peitzel, a friend of his. And when the insurance companies were breathing down his neck for having set fire to the third floor, and you can see here this, it kind of gets weirder up on the top. There's a temporary roof that they had to add after a fire there. Because after he added the third floor, he took out at least 4 fire insurance policies on it. And strangely enough, summer of 1893, there was a nasty fire on the third floor. Insurance companies were breathing down his neck, but Benjamin Peitzel owed him a favor. He said, "Ben, here's what we're going to do. We are going to go to Philadelphia. We are going to find the dead body that looks like you. We are going to say that it's you. Then take that life insurance money, move to South America, and live like kings. Damn hell-ass kings." Peitzel owed Holmes a favor. He might have thought that they were really going to fake his death. But instead, when they got to Philadelphia in September of 1894, Holmes just killed Benjamin Peitzel, tried to make it look like an accident, then claimed the insurance money and started traveling around with 3 of Benjamin Peitzel's kids, Alice, Nellie, and Howard. The insurance company put 2 and 2 together, and having done so, they tracked him to Boston. The Boston police didn't want to act on a coroner's warrant, but they said, "We find out you're also wanted in Texas for some horse swindles." And he said, "Well, I tell you what, I'm probably also wanted in Philadelphia as an insurance fraudster. I don't want to go to Texas as a horse thief. Send me to Philadelphia for insurance fraud instead." So when they got to Philadelphia, they said, okay, Holmes, you've been traveling around with these 3 kids. Where are they now? And he said, oh, they're off with their father who has faked his death. Because we were trying to do insurance fraud. I admit that right away because I am, in fact, a big insurance fraud guy. Not a murderer, just a really big insurance fraud guy. And this was a really big deal for a while. The newspapers were all over this. H.H. Holmes arrested, false death, swindler. For 9 days he was all over the paper when there wasn't even more than a little suspicion of murder. But then when Holmes went on trial the next summer, he changed his story a little bit. He said, okay, yes, that was in fact Benjamin Peitzel's body, but it was a suicide. I just made it look like an accident so that the family would get the insurance money. And he was convicted on that charge, but the district attorney immediately took him to his office and said, okay, Holmes, earlier you said those 3 missing kids were off with their father. Now you say their father's dead. Where are they really? And Holmes said, oh, they've gone to London with an old girlfriend of mine named Minnie Williams. Minnie had been living with Holmes and as well as her sister in July of 1893. Neither of them had been seen since. And Holmes had already told everybody, well, Nanny, Minnie's sister, is dead, but Minnie killed her. I just helped get rid of the body. And if you find any other dead bodies, Minnie probably did that too, but made it look like it was me so she won't get in trouble for killing her sister. It didn't go too well, but the detective was put on the case of finding these 3 children's bodies, and eventually they were found, 2 of them were found, in a cellar in Toronto, the cellar of a rental property that Holmes had been renting with them for a while. So as soon as this came out, as soon as the girls' bodies were found, everybody knew Benjamin Peitzel had been murdered. It was all one big murder case. And then people remembered, hey, didn't this guy have a building back in Chicago that was supposed to be full of hidden rooms and secret passages? Don't you think we ought to investigate that? Some of them have been saying that ever since Holmes was first arrested. But now we had a new police chief on the job, a guy by the name of John J. Badenoch. 3 months before, John J. Badenoch had been a flour and feed dealer. He had no idea what he was doing. The new mayor had just made him the chief of police because he liked the cut of his jib. But they spent a few weeks just going around this place saying, we found a rope. Perhaps he was hanging people. Or we found a bench. This could have been the dissection table. And their imaginations just went wilder and wilder and wilder. Eventually the newspapers started saying, you know, we've been going along with this, but they're not really bringing up the goods. They've got a lot of theories and they do a lot of talking, but they're not really finding any evidence. Maybe next time they ought to talk a little bit less. So right at this point, right when they were starting to lose everybody, the police said, guess what? We found the answer to why we can't find the bodies. This was a man named Myron G. Chappell. Myron tells us that he used to buy dead bodies from H.H. Holmes to turn into skeletons to sell to medical schools. And for a couple of days, the papers went along with this until they checked into his story and found that it was not even remotely true. This was really just a guy who would say anything the police told him to if they poured enough whiskey down his throat. So this case had already kind of died down in Chicago. There were a few people who had disappeared. We could confidently say that Holmes probably killed 9 or 10 people. But it was after it was starting to die down in Chicago that the New York World published an article not only claiming that this was a hotel that Holmes could have used to kill World's Fair victims, in a one paragraph that is repeated in every book about Holmes since, but also published this really lurid diagram with names like the 5-door room, the secret room, the mysterious clothes room, the dummy elevator for lowering bodies, the black closet, the room with the 3 corpses, the blind room, the hanging secret chamber, the dark room, the asphyxiation chamber, the death shaft, the maze. This got reprinted in the Chicago Tribune. It got reprinted in pretty much everything written about Holmes after the fact. But we can say, well, the stories you would later hear in the 1940s on saying maybe he killed as many as 200 people, which is now just the starting point. Around Halloween, it can go up into the thousands. But there are a few. He probably killed Julia Connor as well as her 6-year-old daughter, Pearl. Julia and Pearl had been living in the castle building. Holmes was having an affair with Julia. Later on, he was fairly consistent in saying that Julia had died during an abortion. Pearl he probably killed with cyanide. Then he had a girlfriend named Emmeline Sagrand who disappeared out of the place in late 1892. Again, he was fairly consistent that she died during an abortion. Minnie and Nanny Williams, he had this long-winded story about how Minnie had killed Nanny and he had just helped her drop the body in Lake Michigan. No body that could have been either of the two girls was ever found. Most likely, I would say they were probably killed with poison and disposed of in Lake Michigan. And Holmes had this whole long story. Oh, it was Minnie and this mysterious guy named Hatch. He was eventually convicted only of the murder of Benjamin Peitzel. It's the only one they got him on. And he was hanged in hanged in Philadelphia in 1896. It's a drawing from the New York World. He was buried in cement because he thought people were talking about digging up his body to put his bones on display and stuff. So he arranged to be buried in a giant block of cement, not reckoning with the awesome power of the History Channel, who dug him up a few years back for the show American Ripper. I'm on about half of the episodes of the show. I told him it was definitely going to turn out to be Holmes, not somebody faking his death. But they did the test. It turned out I was right. I had no problem with them doing this, though. It's not like we're besmirching the honor of a good man. But we're going to move into what we went on today's mini-tour. For a while, the newspapers were saying that Holmes had an accomplice by the name of Jacob Schmid, alias Johann Hawk. So here we are on Elston in California by the Bucket of Blood record store. We'll spin around here just a little bit. There's one little block of townhouses over here. Welcome along, those of you just joining us. Now down the row here, you see these ones that are just underneath me, the newer looking ones. That at the time was 333 West Belmont. It's 2738 Belmont now, and that was the home for a while of a woman by the name of Julia Steinbrecher, who in 1895, August of 1895, right in the middle of the Holmes investigation, this is what would have been on the front page of the paper on the day of her wedding, was a woman by the name of Julia Steinbrecher. I got a better picture than this here. Julia Steinbrecher met a guy by the name of Johann Hawk. He was calling himself Jacob Hawk at the time. Where did I put that picture? Here we go. He met her, spoke to her a while, and then proposed that they get married. He was a younger man. She was several years older than he was, but he said, I've got lots and lots of money. I just moved here from Germany. If you marry me, you'll never have to worry again. Shortly after the wedding, she started to get sick. A guy who had been the best man at the wedding came to visit, and she said, I believe my husband might be poisoning me. When she died a couple of months later, she was buried at Graceland Cemetery in a grave that I assume is probably unmarked. But I just found out she was at Graceland today, just a little bit too late to add her to the Graceland Cemetery book. But right in the middle of the funeral, a coroner busted in and said, I believe this may have been a murder. So Hawk just happened to have a death certificate handy where a doctor named Dr. Grimm had signed off on it being a death from natural causes. He then collected her $4,000 insurance policy. Over the next few years, he did a couple of years in small prisons for swindling, and then bought himself a house. You might recognize this piece of video. I'm going to scroll back just a little. You see that next street over on the right there? There was a house over there on Union Street where Johann Hawk built himself a house. He met a woman by the name of Marie Walker. He met Marie through a candy store that she worked at near Lincoln Park. Said, after about an hour of talking, he said, all right, I like you, you like me, we can get married then, yeah? You know, he talked like a German character on The Simpsons. But it was just a business deal, but she agreed to marry him. Shortly thereafter, she took sick. There's two of me here. That shouldn't be. Shortly thereafter, she took sick. She died after a couple of months of nephritis, a kidney disease that you tend to get from taking too much arsenic. And while she was still lying on the bed, Hawk proposed to her sister, Amelia. And initially she said, no, we shouldn't even talk like that right now. And he said, the dead belong to the dead. Life is for the living. And while her sister's body was still lying in the bed, she agreed to marry Johann Hawk. Now, he didn't kill her. He just took her money and ran off to New York. But that left her to call the police, and thereafter, as his story went around and his picture went around, more and more stories started coming in, and apparently the number of women that this guy had married, the number just went up and up and up, until it got up to being around 55. About a third of these women were also dead, so they disinterred the body of Marie Walker, and determined that yes, it had an awful lot of arsenic. Now at this time, arsenic was almost a perfect crime. People could always get away with arsenic because there was arsenic in embalming fluid. As soon as the undertaker stepped into a room, there was really nothing you could do to get a conviction. But in this case, the undertaker was using a new kind of embalming fluid that didn't involve arsenic. For there to be this much arsenic in the grave, it had to have been murder. So Hawk was traced to New York, where they found him in a boarding house where he had already proposed to the manager, carrying a fountain pen that was full of arsenic, and the number of wives just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And as the guy was just a total goofball. When they brought him back to Chicago, they said, "All right, Hawk, how come you married so many women?" He said, "Oh, older women for Johann go crazy, yeah." Then they asked, "Okay, we want to know their names. What were all of their names?" He said, "Well, the last one was Mrs. Johann Hawk. The one before that was Mrs. Johann Hawk." And then she said, "Okay." He said, "No, I have never seen that woman before." And they said, "Well, don't you know that she just pointed you out as the man who married her and took her money?" And he said, "Oh, well, her eyesight was always bad. I remember that from when I was married to her. Not that I've ever seen her before." The Chicago Evening American had more fun with this case than you ought to have. They for a while claimed that he might have actually been the disguised Louis Toombs, another murderer, who he looked almost nothing like. They also spread around the story that he might have been an old accomplice of H.H. Holmes. After all, he did have a house right next to the castle building. Some of this was the work of George Shippey, a Chicago police inspector who was a total goofball himself. And the best witness they could drum up was M.G. Chappell, the skeleton articulator, who swore, "Yes, I have seen that guy. I've even got a picture of him in the castle building." Then he brought a picture, and there was nobody who looked even remotely like Johann Hawk in the picture. The guy who ran the drugstore at the castle was more of a straight shooter. He said, "No, I've never seen that guy before in my life." But Hawk was eventually hanged here in Chicago. Which, again, the Chicago Evening American used their absolute largest font for that one. Exactly how many people he killed will never really be known. There were women all over the country who died shortly after the wedding, after marrying someone who was probably him, probably in the range of 15 or 16 people. But here's the thing, arsenic is an element. It doesn't biodegrade down to anything else. So most likely these people who are buried still have all of that arsenic down there in the grave. It'd be very interesting to find out sometime. But at the same time he was operating the marriage racket in Chicago, there was another woman currently buried out in Forest Park in the west suburbs. Right over here by the Ducks. In this unmarked space that was underwater not too long ago. For the longest time when I was first putting this tour together, I kept driving clear the hell out to this place and finding it underwater. But it was a woman by the name of Belle Gunness. That's how she looked when she was younger. She used to put out matrimonial ads trying to find wealthy husbands. Initially, she had worked here in Chicago. She ran a candy store. But then after she got an insurance payout when the place burned down, she apparently got the idea that, hey, what a great way to make money. Then there were stories about her husband and relatives and neighbors starting to die, and her getting the insurance money somehow. Eventually, she bought a farm in LaPorte, Indiana, started writing people letters, and wrote out this thing about being buried in Forest Park even when she was down there, the one little bit of a will that she had written out. By this time, she looked about like this. But then one day, the farm in LaPorte burned down. And after it burned down, as people dug through the rubble, they found lots and lots and lots of dead bodies. Apparently, she had been luring people out to this farm, getting a hold of their money, then killing them and feeding them to the hogs. People spent days treating it like a carnival, just running around trying to dig up whatever relics they could find. And talking to the neighbors, talking to people back in Chicago. In Chicago, the police chief said, I believe that she was probably really killing people in Chicago. She probably killed them here, then took the bodies down out to the farm. Why he would let this on himself, other than just publicity, I can't really know. But you'll see up in the corner there, it says, Mrs. Gunness alive. They couldn't find much of her body. They found the fire burned a little bit too hot. Eventually, they found a couple of bits of teeth, some bridge work that had been done for her. But for a while, it looked as though she had somehow mysteriously managed to cut off her own head, hide it really good, then get into bed with 2 children and get burned to a crisp. It doesn't really make a lot of sense logically. So there was a big manhunt all over the place. Newspapers were publishing like composites of what she might look like disguised as a man. Eventually, when they found the bits of dental work, they decided, okay, no, it really is her. She was actually disinterred about 10 or 15 years ago to see if it was actually her. In this case, the results were inconclusive. But I always thought, she was trying to marry rich guys. Johann Hawk was trying to marry rich women. And even at the time, one of the police people said, man, what if they had answered one of each other's ads? Just imagine like the arsenic and old lace. I've been talking about writing that up for the longest time. There's recently been a good book about Belle called Hell's Princess. This is by Harold Schechter. Harold Schechter also previously wrote a book about H.H. Holmes, though I understand that now when people ask him about that one, he says, go read Adam Seltzer's book. But Hell's Princess is probably the best book that can possibly be written about Belle Gunness. He covered every angle. He's very upfront about what we know and what we don't. And even he has really, couldn't even come up with a good theory as to what happened, why the farm burned that night. So there's a lot we don't know about Belle Gunness. There's a lot we're never gonna know about Belle Gunness. But the most we can possibly find out about is in Hell's Princess by Harold Schechter. Do another couple of quick ones here. I'm way over time on this one. This is one of my longer presentations. Usually I try to go about 40 minutes. So I'll take a moment here to say, once again, plug that Patreon. Remember, there is a giveaway going on. This is at Bohemian National Cemetery, the Vrazels family plot. The Vrazels lived on West 19th Street in 1904 in a house that is still standing. But here's what happens if you look it up on Street Views. There's a blur where it ought to be. And if I were there's these conspiracy theorists online who go into who try to determine that H.H. Holmes was really royalty, and they're always accusing me of being a government plant. So they would see this, it's been scrubbed. No, it just looked like this. Here's an older picture of it. But it is still standing, according to Zillow. It's from 1875. But the Vrazels family was in the milk business. But they hired a guy, the daughter of the family hired a guy named Herman Bilik to make her a love potion. Herman Bilik was a swindler operating in the area, primarily making potions and doing palm reading and things like that. So Mary came to him and said, I'd like a love potion. Then while he was at the house, the family hired him to put a curse on one of their rivals in the milk business. And thereafter, the family started to die. So the story started going around that he had been giving people powders. The police theory at the time, or at least the theory of George Shippey, which is not necessarily something I would put a lot of weight on, was that Herman was having an affair with the mother of the family and decided to kill everybody off. But then eventually the mother of the family died as well, and they decided, well, should have been suspicious that clearly wasn't the case. Also, he wasn't poisoning his own wife or children or anything. But young Jerry said, I know it. Herman has been giving them all of the powders. He's the one who has been poisoning all of my family. So Herman Bilik was sentenced to be executed for having murdered several members of this family. But right in the middle of it, there was Emma, one of the younger people in the family, had her husband die of arsenic poisoning. The police just kind of brushed that one off. But while he was awaiting trial, somebody went to Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who would later be the famous commissioner of baseball who banned Shoeless Joe Jackson, and tried to get an appeal going. It turned out that Jerry had recanted his testimony. He said, I only said that because the police said if I didn't say Mr. Bilik did it, they were going to say that I did it. This is exactly the kind of crap the Chicago police were always pulling in those days, and about an hour before Herman Bilik was supposed to be arrested, Kennesaw Mountain Landis allowed his appeal to move forward. And based on Jerry having recanted his evidence, and really none of the stories about him ever really adding up, Herman Bilik was eventually given a commutation to life in prison, and about a decade later he was released from prison, pardoned in 1917. There he is with a hat on. He only lived about another year before he was before he died. But he has recently been the subject of a really good book by Steve Shukas called Poisoned. And Steve was the first one to really dig into this and to find out that Herman Bilik probably was not, in fact, the murderer. He went down in history as a serial killer, but almost certainly was framed as such. The most likely suspect is Emma Vrazels was probably doing it, probably trying to get the family money. When her husband mysteriously died of arsenic poisoning, the police just kind of covered it up. They knew they were never going to get a conviction against a woman. That was a common thing in Chicago at the time. Also, they had already decided that Bilik did it, so if they changed their mind, they would have lost face. Also, they were really, crooked. Couple of years after that, we're going to move a little bit out of Chicago briefly here. And we're going to go out west to the suburbs to Aurora, Illinois. And out in Aurora, Illinois, is St. Nicholas Cemetery. Burial place of a guy named Joseph Assman. And another guy whose name is hilarious. But right in the midst of it is a gravestone for a woman by the name of Teresa Hollander, who is not only buried at this cemetery, she also died at the cemetery. One day she stepped off of a train and apparently was lured into the cemetery and was found brutally murdered in the cemetery the next day. It's a picture of it close up. The main thing people tend to remember about this case today is that somebody connected with the case took a picture of the corpse's eyeball based on the idea that maybe they would contain an image of the last thing that she had seen, which presumably would be the murderer. And one optician they talked to at the time said, yeah, that would actually be possible. You just wouldn't be able to pick it up with any kind of camera you could possibly get in Aurora, Illinois. So her ex-boyfriend, Anthony Petrus, was very quickly accused of murdering her just because they couldn't really think of any other suspects. Mary E. Holland, an amateur detective who worked with the police quite a bit, she was an early advocate for fingerprint evidence, analyzed the case and said there's no way Anthony Petrus would have been the one to do this. They still brought him on trial. After a couple of hung juries, he was finally freed. The story of the retina is really what held on. But Teresa Hollander was really only the first of women who were brutally murdered around Aurora over the next couple of years. There was a woman by the name of Jenny Miller who was buried over nearby. And they seem to have been being killed primarily by hardware, which led people to start calling him the Aurora Hammerman, which, as a child of the 80s, I just can't stop thinking like this when I see this. But over the course of a couple of years, there were a few attacks like this. There was never even really a good suspect for who it might have been. But some people connected to the Villisca Axe Murder House in Iowa. Similar style of killing, similar lack of motives. The idea is maybe it was somebody who was traveling around doing things like this. The Aurora Earper story is one that I've been meaning to get a little more into, as I don't think anybody's done a proper job of researching that one yet. There's a lot of them that have kind of slipped through the cracks. We got just enough time. We'll go over here to the Tri-Taylor neighborhood. We're just past where the Starbucks is now. At 2044 Ogden lived a woman by the name of Louisa Lindelof, who was a fortune teller by trade. So the other thing you see a lot of in these cases is a lot of fortune tellers and a lot of doctors. But here is her with the lawyer George Lindelof, who is sometimes said to be the inspiration for the Great Gatsby. His daughter Romola was the first to play Dorothy in a Wizard of Oz movie. But Louisa was a fortune teller whose family started dying, and she kept on very, very accurately predicting their dates of deaths. Apparently she was using arsenic and had this crystal ball that she would look into. The crystal ball reputedly contained a tear from the eye of the original Cleopatra. She reputedly spent like $500 for the thing, but was poisoning family members for the insurance money. There's a little bit of a question about whether it was really for the insurance money or what. But bodies were exhumed after people got suspicious. A police officer went there in disguise and said, I'm a famous fortune teller. I'd like to have a chance at reading your crystal ball. So he looked into it and said, I see your family, and they're telling me you killed them. You're under arrest. Very dramatic scene. Now, during the trial, they tried to say that really all of this was just hallucinations because of arsenic in the wallpaper. And really the way that they died wasn't the arsenic that she gave them, it was the arsenic in the wallpaper, which was a fairly common defense at the time. There was arsenic in the bright green wallpaper going around. There's a good book on that called Bitten by Witch Fever that came out by Lucinda Dickens Hawksley, who came on one of my ghost tours a few years back. It's a really cool book as well, all about arsenic wallpaper. Louisa was eventually sentenced to a long term in prison, died very shortly into her term after having killed any number of people. And one more to cover. We'll go out to the Wicker Park area. Over in Wicker Park on Winchester Street was the home of a woman by the name of Tilly Klimek. Well, her name wouldn't have been Tilly Klimek at the time, or it would have been something else. I wouldn't be able to pronounce it correctly. But Tilly is thought to have murdered at least 4 husbands as well, also with arsenic poisoning. While she was living in this place, well, here's Tilly herself. And here is Kupchik. I think that's pronounced Kupchik. Frank Kupchik. He was her 3rd husband, started getting very sick, and he would tell her occasionally, I think I'm feeling better now, and she would just say, nope, you're going to die. At one point, she brought home a coffin that she had bought for him on discount and said, yep, I know you're going to die, here's your coffin. And then supposedly when he died, she put on a dance record and danced around his deathbed. Now, really, you could actually skew this as being just the family's sense of humor, but then she moved just around the corner. She married again to Mr. Klimek this time, Joseph Klimek, moved around over to what is now 1453 Thomas, another building that's still standing. Married a guy by the name of Joe Klimek. And just down the road from here lived her cousin Nellie Kulik. After Joseph got sick and went to the hospital, people started saying, there's something really fishy about all this. Let's dig up the bodies. This is supposedly one of the bodies being dug up. This is in the Chicago Tribune's archives. I don't think it's real. The last name doesn't match any of Tilly's reputed victims. Eventually, they accused her of having killed about 23 people. Husbands, friends, neighbors, relatives. It's just too good of a picture. It's also too well lit considering it's supposed to be dark at the time. It really looks like this whole thing is probably something done in a studio set. But she and her husband, Nellie, were both put on trial, and they led to a lot of things on this, saying these women don't stand a chance because they're not good looking enough. Now, this was the early 1920s. The story that women got out of murder raps by flirting with the jury, like in the musical Chicago, that was based on real cases, and there were a lot more cases than just the ones that they based the trip on. Women got indicted for murder in Chicago quite a bit, but almost never actually got convicted. The Chicago Tribune's ace crime writer, Genevieve Forbes Herrick, who called Tilly Dumpy, would harp about this all the time, that women never actually got brought to justice in Chicago. She said that Tilly was really convicted mainly because she didn't know how to use lipstick properly. Now, Nellie over on the left was eventually acquitted. I have no idea how. Her own children testified against her. But in any case, Tilly was sentenced to life in prison, died in prison a few years later. And I'll also just cover one more because the house is still there. This green one down here on 22nd Place in what is now Chinatown. I'll hurry this along a bit. This was the home of a kid by the name of Nicholas the Choir Singer Viana. Looked about like that. Was a member of a group that they came to call the Murder Clique. Just down the road was Sam Cardinella's pool hall. Sam Cardinella, the way that they wrote this story up, Sam Cardinella was like a guy who had read Oliver Twist and thought it was a how-to manual. He was luring kids like Viana into his pool hall where he would teach them to commit crimes. Viana said that he went there on his way to choir practice one day and a week later committed his first murder. But really, he was mostly lying about this. The cops decided to pin everything on Cardinella because they were really going after the pool halls at the time. Trouble with a capital T. But Viana really had been committing crimes since a long time before that pool hall even opened. He had probably killed at least half a dozen people. Not so much as serial killing, he was just, if somebody got in his way, somebody had something he wanted, he would go ahead and kill them. He eventually was put on trial, sentenced to hang, wrote a confession saying, "I would always tell kids today, stay away from pool halls. Pool's all right, but it always leads to worse things." Next thing you know, they'll be rebuckling their knickerbockers below the knee. He was also still known as a choir singer. He sang on the way to the noose. He sang in prison every night. People said that it beat any show you ever saw. And probably the best evidence against Cardinella himself, they tried to bring him back to life after his hanging. They took him over to an undertaking parlor on Blue Island where apparently they used a pulmotor, a heart machine, to try to get him going again. And they tried to do the same thing on Cardinella. That time they got caught. That was what turned up that they had tried that on Viana. It didn't work in any case. They told Cardinella that it had worked on Viana. But there's a few of these that are actually their whole entire things. Like H.H. Holmes I do entire things on all the time. And next week will be a brand new program all about Johann Hawk in much more detail than this. So that means it's a pretty good time to plug the upcoming events. Sunday morning, the next full-length tour, 10 o'clock, will be Rose Hill Cemetery in autumn. That'll be a virtual tour of Rose Hill Cemetery, filmed when the leaves were absolutely at their peak, primarily in 2019 or 2020. Gorgeous, gorgeous leaves in that place. And then next week, a week from today, a brand new presentation that I've been putting together, all about Johann Hawk. Johann Hawk has not really been covered in enough depth, and we'll talk a little bit about why. There's a lot of data, but not enough good data. There's only one book I know of about him, and it's frankly not all that good. I'm not going to name names. So that's what's coming up. Also, for those of you new around here, on the Facebook, we do a morning mini tour every day at 10 o'clock via Facebook Live. Tomorrow will be Find a Grave Friday. On Fridays, we go to a cemetery where I know a particular person is buried, but I don't find out exactly where or what the grave looks like. We figure it out in the comments, and then we play hot and cold until I find it. And Fridays at 6:30, I'm on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page for a show called Whiskey and a Cookie, where we drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. Should you need a mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, coffee mug, flasks, shot glass, etc., etc., cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago has everything you need and probably several things that you really don't need. But that's what it's all about. And with that, I will just put the thanks button up. Once again, we are doing a giveaway today. If you sign up or send me a message on Patreon, right down there, you can enter to win a copy. You are entered to win a copy of Murder Maps USA, this fine hardcover volume from Thames and Hudson, my latest book, and it'll be my latest book until this summer when the Graceland Cemetery book comes out. And with that, I will take a breath, put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will just hang out until, like we always do. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Dana. Betsy, I've got some notes for new designs for Cafe Press, but I haven't finished any of them yet. Thanks, Marita. Thanks. Sorry, I don't really see too many of the comments while I'm doing the tour. I know you guys are great in the comments. I have some of the best commenters in the business. Thanks, Rodney. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Glenn and Lindsay and Audrey. That was at least 10,000 words? Geez, that's nice. If I transcribed this, I'm a fourth of the way to a book. More if we illustrate the hell out of it. Hey, Seymour and Edgar. Welcome back, Barbara. Thanks, Laura. I've seen Kristen's Johann Hawk t-shirt. That is awesome. Amy, yes, you can. Hey, Kathy. Thanks. Thanks, Victoria. I always play stuff that was live in Chicago. Eric, yes, I Iron Mike Malloy back in the 30s. No, I don't know that. I am a licensed New York tour guide. Have a good night, Mandy. Welcome to all the new people. I hope you enjoyed it tonight. We do these things like crazy. Oh, Gene. Penal system in 7th grade. There was a whole thing about that on Beavis and Butthead when I was in 7th grade. Any idea how many unmarked graves there are in Graceland? I couldn't give you a number, but it's a lot. I mean, gravestones are expensive, and there's periods in history when not having one was more the thing. Barbara, I mostly work with tourist groups in New York, so it's like going to the Statue of Liberty and stuff. But I do a version of Grave Robbing 101 in New York as well. All right, yeah, pretty good numbers tonight too. Over 300 people. We're not as high as we used to be in our peak, but thanks, Dana. Yeah, I'll get everybody's Patreon messages for sure. Miles. Miles knows what this music means. Doreen, we do, mostly I take school groups around New York, so we do like the Statue of Liberty, Times Square, Chinatown, assorted museums, Central Park, all the tourist stuff, really. The Bilik one? Yeah, let me go back to the Bilik one for the book. Where was that? The Bilik book is Poisoned by Steve Shookus.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
Okay, now Miles, I think, wants me to break out the jumping toy. In fact, I'm sure that's what he's on about. Okay, Miles. Where is it? Here it is. That's where you left it. Tilt this down so you can all watch him do his stuff. All over town. Oh, you gonna jump? Good stretch, Priya. You gonna jump for it? And Miles' latest trick is just to stay up on high places and try to get it from there. He thinks that's very clever of him. Now he's taking me for a walk. Come on, people are watching. He wants to play, but he doesn't want to jump today. Okay, guys, let's go play with it. Now, Miles likes to jump for that thing, but I don't think he really wants the jumping. He wants to catch it. He'd like to catch it and take me for walks. How much more indexing do I have? It depends. I've done the Graceland book index up until at least all the names in the book are covered. Beyond that, I've also got like Civil War, World War II, 1918 pandemic, stuff like that. It depends on how many more topics I think up that I want to add into there. Angela, this is Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel. I play it off of archive.org. What era is the most unmarked graves from? There was a whole thing in the late 19th and early 20th century. The first idea of like just going back to nature. People were getting like more like shrubs or like the whole section behind the Eternal Silence statue at Graceland is mostly late 19th, early 20th century, and it's mostly people who didn't want gravestones, which can really drive their great-grandparent children crazy. Like, there's one place they just let grow back over into a prairie, and people who have relatives there hate that prairie. This is probably what your great-grandparents wanted. Jennifer, did I? Here, let me show the lamp again. I did, in fact, get the lamp. And look at this. I can make it change color. Stay spooky, Bob. Mike, I could absolutely do that. Jeremiah Price being the most famous example of the guy who insisted on just taking some peppermint lozenges for his cholera instead of seeing a physician. Oh, I don't know about the beefalo tonight, Laura. Greektown, that'd be an interesting one. It's just such a small neighborhood, though. Getting smaller and smaller, too. There's like 2-3 Greek places left there now. Cindy! Is that Aunt Cindy Miller? It looks like it. I don't think it's going to be too cold tomorrow. It's been like in the 30 range lately. So I won't have to do an above ground one for Find a Grave like last week, even though I went to the wrong cemetery. Now, Maria, I had to rig the thing up. I got some Hugh Phillips strip lights and just rolled them up into a ball and put them on the inside of it. Catherine, that's awesome! He is the Ebenezer Scrooge of Chicago. I wonder how old he was, come to think of it. I bet I got something on here. Let me see. Do-do. Alright, looking up Price's burial lot now. I think I got it on here. In a place easy to find. No. Let's see. I'm pretty sure I got his lot record in here. Those who may not know, Jeremiah Price was a friendless man in Chicago, loved nothing but business, and it was said that if he had any imagination, it did not extend beyond the alphabet. One day he went to a physician complaining of rice-colored diarrhea, which was the first sign of cholera. This was 1854. Everybody was dying of cholera. So the pharmacist told him, you should get to a doctor. He said, no, I'll just take these peppermint lozenges. Which didn't work. I really want to have him say, I've done my own research. The next day they found him not only dead, but with
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting...
$20,000 strapped to his body like he was trying to take it with him. Okay. Let me see. I know I've seen his lot record, and it was after they closed the office. Huh. Alright, I'm just gonna try this the hard way. Okay. So I'm not seeing the comments right now. I'm scrolling. I'll have to save this for another day. Brian, the Holmes Castle was torn down in the 30s. There was a fire there that wrecked most of it in the 1890s, but they rebuilt the rest and it was torn down in the late 30s. It's of no sense at all that I wouldn't have saved the Jeremiah Price stuff. This is gonna drive me nuts now. Why isn't that turning up in my files?
And here's a short encore.
Will it be in my other files?
Forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance. Presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Okay, I got it. I found it. And here it comes. I'm going to show it. Well, first I'll restart the Benny a little bit. Move that back. And here it is, everybody. Jeremiah Price's lot record. Says here he was 61. What else it says here? Lot needs seed. That'll be $5 for LCP Freer to have to pay out of the estate. Well, full along North Line. I say I love you dearly, for I am yours sincerely, with all my heart. Given to heirs of Jeremiah Price, which took a really long time to determine, as he died without a will. His probate file went on for years. Equally Dickensian. Ooh! Next time, next to the legal archives, maybe I'll ask about seeing his probate file. That could be good. It went on for years. Well, 61 was old enough at the time that they could have said old age in the interment book. But no, he died of cholera. While I've found it, I'm going to quick put that into Evernote while I'm thinking of it. Occurs to me now, I also could have just checked his check the PDF of the book. That'll have his I know I found everybody's birth date as far as I could on that one. Did Benny Goodman play other venues than Chicago? I'm sure he did, yeah. I'd have to look up where, but I'm sure he did. But you know, after one of these shows at the Congress Hotel, John Hammond was just pumped up and wanted more. Went out driving around Michigan Avenue in his car. His radio somehow picked up a station from way down in New Orleans that was broadcasting Count Basie's band featuring Lester Young. Loved it so much he drove quick down there to sign them to his record label. They told him about this cool singer they knew named Billie Holiday. He signed her too. 25 years later, he signed Bob Dylan. 10 years after that, he signed Bruce Springsteen. And you could trace it all back to these Benny Goodman shows of the Congress. Well, if you're going to smell something on the grave of a cholera victim, peppermint's the way to go. But at least finding his body might have been a tiny bit less horrific. See you, Susan. Where is Benny Goodman buried? That's a good question, too. Thanks to everybody signing up for the Patreon. That's my number one thing these days. That's what's keeping me afloat. But yeah, Benny Goodman is buried at Long Ridge Cemetery in Stamford, Connecticut.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passions when they played by Benny Goodman. And oh, another one.
You know, that makes me want to put up the... well, I haven't been to Benny Goodman's grave. I was just at Johnny Mercer's just a few weeks ago. Johnny Mercer's is terrific. Let me put this picture up here. This is at Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah. And it's such a cool grave. This is part of it. Is if you look they got like little lines from his songs all over. Like if you look at the little angel over here, it says, "My mama done told me," right on there. I thought I had one where I had the whole bench for him. Here's a close-up on his individual one. With the dead flowers on it. Wrote such songs as "One for My Baby, One for the Road," "Accentuate the Positive." The first song Bob Dylan is known to have performed publicly when he was a little kid. Mega nice. I noticed they had a sign up at Bonaventure. Private tours were $650. I was just looking up how much private. People ask me for private tours a lot, and I'm never sure quite what to charge people, because usually people, I think, want to just like pay regular price for their party, but not have other people on the tour. I'm pretty sure when I quote people $650, they would balk at that. Thanks, Diane. Gene, I've done some of that. The Lake Michigan Triangle thing is something you hear mainly from Ghost Tour people. Les Paul's in Waukesha. I should visit that one. One day when I know the roads are going to be clear, we'll head out to Waukesha. I'm pronouncing that one right? I know Mandy lived there for a while. She caught me calling it Waukesha one time. Again, it's a big thing among Chicagoans, is we never know how to pronounce Wisconsin names. Greg, yeah, I've tried all of I haven't tried like the $800 Heaven's Doors, but all of the regularly priced ones I have. The rye is especially good. The bourbon's a little sweet, but it makes a great Manhattan. The whiskey is very, very, very woodsy. But the rye is the best. The rye tastes like a hot, brown, Midwestern summer night. Well, speaking of people mispronouncing place names, I'm from Des Moines, You come to Des Moines on tour and pronounce it correctly, we will love you forever. And if you say Des Moines, we'll definitely be talking about it later that night. Wait, are we supposed to get snow now? People are talking like snow. Oh yeah, tomorrow night it looks like. Okay, well by tomorrow night I'll be done driving for the day, so. Oh yeah, Illinois. Well, not Illinois. Des Moines, Illinois, Des Plains. Miles, you want to say hi to the people some more? Say hi. Miles will be turning 3 in about 6 weeks. You guys have been watching him since he was barely 1.
That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, Priya. You gonna go warm up my chair for me for when I go read in the big chair? Aw, very nice of you. I wonder if they can hear you meowing like that, Miles. Gene Krupa's in Calumet City? How did I not know that one? Miles? Kendra, don't worry, I won't pick a winner till tomorrow sometime. '99 Phoenix. Oh, Miles. Here we go. Your ears played with. I know you like that. If you send the Patreon messages, I'll definitely see it.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking. And here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
I tell you, if I get the probate file on Jeremiah Price, we'll really go to town. That might, I don't know. It was still going on at the time of the Great Chicago Fire, I think. He died 17 years before the fire, but the probate file was still going on thereafter. So that could be an interesting case. The legal archives are a lot slower. I used to go into, well, they used to hold me up as an example of please don't be like this guy. I would go in and ask for 12 H.H. Holmes suits. But now there's 3 or 4 maximum, and it'll take twice as long as it used to. So, but luckily nobody else got sued as much as H.H. Holmes, so I shouldn't have too much to worry about. Alright, Gene Krupa and Coco Taylor are both good ideas. A little further than I like to go for mini tours. Unless I happen to be in the area for something else, like last week when we did the Axl Rose's Boyhood Home. Which is one of my favorite mini tours ever. Now, Priya is generally aloof other than food time. But Miles, now that he's gotten into this toy... Here, Miles. Gonna come get it? Miles, you have to actually chase it. I'm not just gonna hold it here for you. If you're not gonna chase it, I'm just gonna put it back down. Well, alright everybody, I have had a long one today. It was one of my busiest days in a while putting this one together, starting out on the Johann Hawk one, and also getting this cool lamp. I will show that lamp video one more time. There. But alright, everybody. So, once again, there is a giveaway going on tonight. If you are on the Patreon or sign up for the Patreon, if you sign up, you're automatically entered. Otherwise, if you're already on it, just go and send me a message on there to enter for your copy of Murder Maps USA, a fine hardcover volume. So, thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. There's going to be a cool H.H. Holmes post on there tomorrow if you're on the H.H. Holmes tier. And otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow morning for Find a Grave Friday. Quick plug for the other upcoming events. Sunday morning, Rose Hill Cemetery, and Thursday, a week from tonight, brand new tour, digging clear into the career of Johann Hawk. So thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours, saying stay safe, stay strong, and if you can, you want to say it, Miles? Stay spooky.